The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Voices beat, but the brains are strong. This is one of those moments where the body is no longer willing. The mind really wants to do a podcast, but the voice is petering out. Luckily, there are two of us, and even though we're both falling apart at the seams, together we can form one competent human being. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, everybody. I am Dan Besbris. It's Thursday, which means Dan Besbris is joined by the ever-popular, the great, @BallWithNeil on Twitter, the man who places you in hoop ball leagues, Neil Rochlani. What's up, my man? We were just talking about your hometown before we came on air.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. Very flattering. Thanks. Sure. The hoop ball leagues are going still. We got people still trickling in, so I want to encourage people to contact me and still sign up. I don't think we've surpassed last year's yet, but we're on pace.
We're close.
And I'm fresh off the mock draft from last night with Adrian Benjamins and a bunch of hoop ball people and listeners and all that.
Yeah, I don't want to blow any of the fun stuff that you guys are going to talk about on tomorrow's pod. So I'll leave it. I do want to ask maybe one question about the mock because I have my own curiosities. But I will introduce it. I will make sure that everybody knows, and we'll talk a little about what's coming up on tomorrow's show. Neil and Adrian, of course, handling Fridays here on Fantasy NBA Today. They'll be talking about that mock draft that they ran late Tuesday night, if I'm not mistaken. But again, I do have a question I want to sneak in. At Dan Besbris, @BallWithNeil on Twitter. If you want to give us a follow, of course, you can also follow Hoopball on the Twitter sphere at HoopBallFantasy and at HoopBallTweets. And the reason that I want to push those extra hard these days, Neil, you're well aware of this as well. The Hoop Ball Draft Guide is out. It is a massive, whopping 400 player profiles among so many other things. And of course, on October the 1, the B150 gets added to the Hoop Ball Draft Guide. It only gets more expensive, by the way, as you get closer to that October 1st date. So if you're thinking about getting it, get it right now. Neil, I'm sure you've used the Brewski 150 in the past, right?
Sure. No, actually, yeah. I have. I joined Hoop Ball last year in springtime, so I have not used the Brewski 150.
Oh my God!
I'm a huge fan of Aaron Brewski and his knowledge.
Oh my God! What about back when he was at Roto World?
I have not actually used the B150. So
even back in Aaron's Roto World days, he was putting it out for free at first. I think 8-9 years ago.
I have this stubborn. Old man, I've got to do it myself type way. So I just do my own forecast and just try to go that way. But yeah, I should probably take the advice of people better than me. But so far I haven't utilized it yet. I'm looking forward to learning, like I did today on yesterday's podcast. I had no idea that defensive stats like blocks are not necessarily a sign of being better on defense. I know I'm kind of meandering, but anyway, I don't.
No. It was a fun show. Talked to Zach Feldman, by the way, on yesterday's pod. If you didn't have a chance to listen to it, you can always go back and do that. It'll be, I think, available basically forever. We have the last 100 shows up on Fantasy NBA Today. So after 3 months, I doubt you're going back for old programs, but certainly one day you could check it out. Zach, of course, writing for Hoop Ball. He's a numbers guy. He's an analytics guy. And, it's funny. You say that word and there's this cringe. You can almost hear the cringe that comes from the general public. It's that Charles Barkley mentality, right? Where you hear analytics and then everybody that's kind of an old school sports guy, they go, ugh, like a computer's making decisions instead of a human. But I thought what Zach expressed at the beginning of yesterday's show was kind of was pertinent, was the best way to put it in. He was like, look, it's one more way to add to your arsenal. You don't have to eliminate something else just because you're riding something new. It's indicative, unfortunately, of kind of today's society where everything has to be very black and white. There's never two answers to a question, Neil. Neil, it's always, what's the answer to this question? Well, it's got to be one very simple solution. And as with most things in this universe, it's rarely the case where it's just one simple thing. So, without getting too far off on my own wild tangents about fixing the world, for fantasy sports, just having one more tool in your tool belt is never a bad thing. What did you take away, by the way, from yesterday's podcast as someone who listened in? Because I was sort of in the moment trying to make sure I was asking the right questions, and on my own show, I didn't want to sound stupid.
Well, that never happened. You did a great job. What I really learned, a couple of things I learned, which when I touched on earlier, is that defense. I didn't know that defensive stats are not really a good indicator of defensive ability. Secondly, and this is what you just talked about, he mentioned how when you do analytics, you also have to watch as well. And that's something I was very ignorant of. I thought analytics was just looking at numbers and looking at breaking down, plus minuses and all other like really advanced stats. I had no idea that you had to watch as well to see what worked. So that was really enlightening to me. And so I'm looking forward to learning more from him because I'm a numbers guy, and I don't know what I don't know yet on analytics. So looking forward
you
to
are a
more.
numbers guy. This feels like I feel like advanced stats is something that'll end up right up your alley. So as Zach goes through his introductory articles, I got a feeling you're going to be reading those things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I need to go back onto the site. I've just been so busy recently that I haven't read a lot of articles recently since the season ended. So I need to go back on there and start to read all of this stuff.
It's like that's the decompression time, right? The off season's decompression. You can't this is when you got to get all the other stuff done. And plus, we do podcasts, so there's enough time that gets invested in it. But yeah, I'm going to be reading those bad boys too. Looking forward to what Zach is set to put out at Hoop Ball over the next couple of months. But of course, we have our own thing coming up. And the first thing I want to mention is, of course, that mock draft. So how did that even come to pass? Did you put that together? Did Adrian put that together? Were you guys like, listen, we got a project, we got an idea, and then all of a sudden you had a whole bunch of hoop ballers doing it? What was the story behind it?
Yeah, well, first of all, as you know, Adrian does so much behind the scenes. So yeah, he's the one who put it together. He does so much more than me. He's fantastic. So he mentioned on the show last week that we wanted to do it, and then he was able to sign up for Yahoo League probably about 20 minutes before it started, and then tweet it out to listeners and also to myself and other hoopball people that, this is the league I'm in. Here's the link. Go and do it. And within like 10 minutes or 5 minutes later, it was all filled up. And I'm not sure. I know there are people on there that weren't part of Hoopball, a couple people, but I think mostly it was Hoopball listeners or contributors. So it was fun. I was so happy. Adrian, I'll just give away. Well, I'm not going to give it away. But anyway.
Oh, come on. Oh man, the tease. All right, you know what? That's good.
I'm going to do that. Yeah, like you said, I don't want to jump on his. I don't even know the right metaphor. Anyway, I want Adrian to be able to take the lead tomorrow and to talk about it. So I don't want to say something.
I gotta know, Neil. Is there going to be a segment on tomorrow's podcast where Adrian yells your name 7 times in a row because he don't know? You know what? Don't give it away. I don't want to know if he got Jaren Jackson Jr. I want Adrian to say it because there is nothing like those moments in that podcast with Adrian got me so hyped for basketball. There's something that energy is contagious. I love that dude.
I do too. He's so much fun.
Yes. So I do have one question about the mock draft, and maybe this is just for like I said, my own morbid curiosities. Did you find that you were able to get the guys you were looking for, or because you were in a draft with largely people that sort of subscribe to the same roots of logic that you do, that in a hoopball mock draft, it seems like it's going to be harder to get hoopball guys?
Yeah, hoopball guys, there are probably a couple that I was hoping to get that I did not get, but a lot of players fell to me that I was really happy to get, and I can elaborate more on that tomorrow, but it wasn't as dreadful as I was expecting. I was expecting almost everyone that I thought I was going to take later would be gone, but there were some players there that I was able to get onto. I actually really like my team.
So what you're saying is a glowing...
like you talked about before, I wanted to print it out and put it on the wall. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no, that's good, because when you started that sentence, you said I wasn't that disappointed, and by the end of the sentence, you were excited about the team. So I'm glad you talked yourself into liking your team. That was that. All right. So by the way, folks, if you want to know more about how that mock went down, listen to tomorrow's show. Adrian and Neil will break down the results of the first Hoopball mock draft that incorporates hoop ballers, hoopball pros, hoopball listeners, all that good stuff. We'll have a million more, by the way, because again, it's just August 30th today. which means we still have almost 7 weeks before NBA opening night. And I was doing a little bit of reflection earlier on Wednesday and going through podcasts from last year. I didn't listen to them. I looked at the names and the descriptions to see what we were doing on this show around this time a year ago. And we were largely going through teams in kind of a post-free agency situation, how they had changed, things that had shifted. We've obviously taken a slightly different path chronologically this offseason. But the one thing that caught my eye was that we really did start breaking down mock drafts by about, let's call it the middle of the second week, beginning of the third week, that area of September. So we're actually getting an earlier start on that this season. We are ahead of where we were last year, and I felt like last year I was more prepared for my own fantasy drafts than at any season I had ever done in the past. And a lot of that is because of ADP. It's a tool that I think it's very straightforward in what the acronym stands for. Average draft position. Seems very obvious. But kind of understanding what the number itself means, every single one tells a story. And to me, that is my greatest weapon. I've said it a couple of times on this week on this podcast, and I'll probably say it, 3 or 4 times a week all the way up until opening night. But understanding where guys go, whether they're going earlier or later, every individual week, every day, whatever it might be, can help you figure out where you need to be taking guys if you want to get them, if you believe that they're, guys that you're targeting, that sort of deal. The reason I bring this up is twofold. Number one, Panda will be putting out ADP reports in the Hoopball Draft Guide. It is the page that I frequent the most of anything in the Hoopball Draft Guide. I look at it every single week, anytime he puts an update on it, because it tells a story. The second reason is because that's the topic on today's podcast. You see what I did there, Neil? That was pretty good, I thought. And I
thought it was great. I knew where you were going, so I wanted to see how you got there.
Yeah, well, that's how. It's because Neil and I are doing this show, and I'm not drinking during today's podcast. So we're coming in way ahead of the curve today. So Neil and I each took a few minutes today. We went over the Yahoo ADPs as of August the 29th, so Wednesday, which, again, doesn't necessarily match up with what their rankings are on Yahoo. There's preseason ranks, and there's average draft position. So these are important little delineating numbers to look at where, a guy like the ADPs, they get slotted into a full number, right? When they line them up on Yahoo, the guy has an ADP of like 26 might not actually be the 26th guy taken because there starts to be those weird jumps in numbers. Like, for instance, and then we're going to get into our exercise for the day, Giannis Antetokounmpo has an ADP of 4.7. Karl Anthony Towns has an ADP of 6.4. They are 5 and 6, respectively, which, yes, if we were rounding, that's what it would come to. But there's actually an ADP difference of 1.7 there. So all I'm saying is that the integers that you get when you look at preseason, they don't necessarily match up with exactly where a guy is getting drafted overall. In fact, Drew Holiday, Ben Simmons, both have the exact same ADP, and yet, if you're Yahoo, you have to put one guy in front of the other. And as far as I can tell, Drew Holiday, I believe he was pre-ranked 15, and Ben Simmons was pre-ranked 21, even though they both have an ADP of 18. So that's where we start with this. So, Neil, you want to get us going here? I think what we can do, and kind of a fun way to look at it, is just to pull out, and it's not that dissimilar from what we did last week, actually, is to kind of look at some of the guys that jumped out at us as really interesting ADPs, whether they are huge values or where they are huge swings and misses. Who's your first guy?
Yeah, so I kind of want to do some different guys. I know we talked about players in the past. So I'm going to skip my first one as I go through the ranks. And this is the one that jumped out at me the most on the first page. Kemba Walker at 13.8. I have him finishing ACAT last year at 29. And I was looking at his minutes. It was pretty strong last year. I don't see where he jumps that much. I was really surprised by that. I'm thinking this might be a function of the rankings. Maybe he's ranked really high, and so he's being skewed towards drafting this high. Do you
So Kemba Walker.
So yeah. So what I was going to say, I'm looking up his stats.
I do have all that stuff in front of me. By the way, Kemba Walker is pre-ranked 12. So yeah, I think you're right. I think that is almost definitely steering his ADP all the way up to 13.8. That's a very high number. Who, by the way, I can give you the 9-cat numbers on him. Kemba Walker was number 28 on a per game basis on 9-cat. Yeah, he played in 80 games, so his totals ended up being a better tally in that regard. I think the totals pushed him up to, let's see if we can find the totals on Kemba. No, actually, it's exactly 28. That doesn't seem right. That's impossible. I got to figure this thing out. So it's showing something wrong on my screen. It had to have pushed him up a little bit, and apparently it didn't. It didn't. I don't know why not. So I'll get that figured out. I don't know why it didn't adjust. But he was 28 on a per game basis. I'm with you, man. I think the only way that this makes sense is if Charlotte is trading away Nick Batum and everyone else on the entire roster. I mean, how does a guy like Kemba go up from where he was? This does feel like he's getting overvalued a bit.
Yeah, and I know that the rankings really influence, like like you just mentioned, where they get drafted, which is really. Well, one I was going to ask you, do you know if rankings change, like for Yahoo, throughout between now and the season?
I'm not 100% certain on that, but I definitely know ADP does.
Well, sure. Yeah, so I'm wondering, I just don't know how they came up with this, and I'm curious where he is on ESPN, but yeah, this seems really, I wouldn't take him before the third round, so I'm really surprised he's going here sort of like early second round.
I feel pretty good about a guy like Kemba going in the, I mean, you could take him. He's been pretty durable, so that's the thing that jumps out to me. He had that one season where he played 62 games, but otherwise he had his rookie year. I think that might have been the lockout season. Last 3, 81, 79, and 80. So the durability factor is a thing. By the way, I fixed it now. He was number 17 in 9-cat on a totals basis because of the 80 games played. So he would actually have to exceed that mark this coming year. It feels like a pretty wild stretch, and it is a good example, Neil. I'm glad you brought this up early in our discussion of what just having his name listed 12th on their page can do for a guy, right? If Yahoo lists him 20th, this ADP is probably 7-8 spots lower. I think what you're seeing is a lot of guys drafting him based on the fact that Yahoo came out and said, hey, number 12 on this dude. Unfortunately, unless this number changes, Neil, at 13.8, I don't think I'm going to end up with any shares of Kemba Walker. I like Kemba Walker, but I'm with you. I'm not taking him. I'm a little bit earlier than you. I don't think I'd take him until about 22 would be about the earliest I think I'd consider grabbing him. And more likely in the high 20s would be where I'd target a guy like that. But if he's going at 14, I'm going to end up with 0 shares of Kemba Walker. That's a little bit sad, but also, sometimes you just have to say, you know what? Somebody else got a decent basketball player. They just got him too early.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw out a comp for you. And can I do that?
Of course.
Another player.
Of course.
So
roll on, man. Let's roll.
So this guy was drafted 39.8, and I might take him over Kemba, Mike Conley.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I would have to think about it. I don't know about a 9-cat, but 8-cat I think would be very close.
So I actually like Mike Conley a lot, and I think I'm probably going to get killed for saying it. He was number 128 in his 12 games that he played last year. Obviously, he only played 12 games, so he was far worse than that on a totals basis. But all you got to do is go back one extra season on Conley and try to. I mean, short-term memory is it's a tough thing in this business. He was number 23 in 9-cat on a per-game basis 2 seasons ago. And yes, there will be a decline for someone like that. But he averaged 20.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, over 6 assists, 1.3 steals on 86% free throw shooting, 46% from the field. It was a fantastic season. It was his career, basically a career best in almost everything except for steals. So, I think I'd still rather have Kemba just because they are really close and Kemba's a much safer player. And if someone was like, hey, in a vacuum, Neil, which of these two guys do you want? You don't have to give up a second-round pick. you'd probably take Kemba too. But if it's like, hey, do you want Kemba and you have to use your 14th pick, or do you want Conley and you have to use your crap? I don't even know what his ADP is. I got to look it up while we're on air right now.
39.8.
Is he really going at 39?
Yeah,
That's surprisingly high too. God, I would have thought he'd drop farther than that, considering what he did to teams last year.
Think that's, okay.
You're right.
Yeah.
I mean, you got the number right. He's going in the 4th round. That surprised the heck out of me.
Yeah, I see them both as like when I do my own like rankings and tiers, I'll put them in probably the same tier and probably have them both in my 3rd round targets. So for me, they're very close.
I was hoping that Conley was going to slip into the 50s. Because I mean, with the way he played last season, like a Victor Oladipo type of situation, coming off a really rough year, big time injury risk. Conley obviously getting older. Not that Oladipo was an injury risk, but he was dinged up in Oklahoma City. If he's really going sub 40, I'm not sure I'm buying on Conley at that price. But it's possible that his ADP moves in the opposite direction as well. So another reason, by the way, to keep an eye on ADP moves here. Maybe Mike Conley ends up getting drafted later as we approach NBA opening day. I just don't know. All right, I guess I'll throw one out there. I can come at you from this angle. Steph Curry. I'm going to go way back up in that 1st round, and Russell Westbrook. They are back-to-back. They are numbers 7 and 8 in preseason ranking. Their ADPs are 6.8 and 7.2. This is in 9-cat. There's basically no universe where Russell Westbrook and Steph Curry should be this close, except a universe where you believe Russ plays 80 games and Steph plays 60 games again. If Steph Curry hits 70 games, he should probably be the number 3 guy in fantasy. I mean, this is very low for him, and it's very high for Russ.
Yeah, I wanted to leave that for you. I know how much you love Steph Curry.
Appreciate you.
Yes. No, this doesn't make any sense either. Steph was 3 at 8-cat as well. Russ was 12 on averages. And I see that kind of how it's going to end up this season. I would take Steph at 3rd or maybe 4th at the latest overall. And Russ, I probably would take at the end of the 1st round, even an 8-cat where turnovers don't matter. So I don't know about this either. Again, this may be a function. I know Curry's ranked. Maybe this is where they ranked her again in Yahoo, but I don't get it.
No, but that's okay though. I mean, this is why it's important to look at what their main page does to people. When you have that draft window up, Neil, and the clock is ticking down, sometimes it's easy to just look at who Yahoo has at the top of their page and say, crap, they probably know something, and then you just click it, and boom, you've got a guy that you sort of didn't intend to get. But here's the ADPs again of those first few guys. James Harden, actually, by the way, is number 1 right now in ADP. He's actually in all across Yahoo leagues. He's going ahead of Anthony Davis. I believe this is for 9-cat because that's the league that I'm registered under right now. Then Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, LeBron James is going 4. Then Giannis, Karl Anthony Towns, and Steph Curry. I mean, it's maybe this is 8-cat. Maybe they're showing me 8, even though I'm in a 9-category league. I find that odd and sort of difficult to analyze. Otto Porter, I guess, at 34 on this ADP, which doesn't really match up with what we mentioned. His projection would put him in a 9-cat. Some really weird stuff going on here, Neil, and I'm struggling to figure out how they get to that. But you know what? Instead of making excuses for what Yahoo's showing on their page, I think we have to continue to roll with this and assume that this is what everybody's looking at. And so when these players get ranked, when they get pulled up on that draft day page, this is what people are going to be looking at, and it's going to steer them in the wrong direction often, right? Like Steph Curry at 7? 8-cat or 9-cat? That seems crazy to me.
Yeah, I was just doing the percent difference in terms of value last year. And Steph Curry, I think, was 65% better than Russell Westbrook in terms of value. He's showing a 1.24 versus a 0.75 for Westbrook. So it makes no sense. Steph should go no later than 5th, in my opinion.
Yeah, and he was not. It's not like with Steph, if you punt turnovers, he becomes a much better basketball player. He averaged 3 turnovers a game last season. So turning turnovers off, putting him in an 8-cat, he gets a statistical bump. Yes, other guys get a bigger bump. James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Boogie, LeBron James, guys like that. They leap farther up the rankings. But Steph stays inside the top 3 in 8-cat or 9-cat. So regardless of what you're looking at, him being ranked at 6.8, his ADP at 6.8, that's fantastic. I'm looking at this and I'm like, I really hope I have the 6th pick in my fantasy league this year, because I think there's a decent chance I end up with Steph or Karl Anthony Towns. What an unbelievable steal that could be.
That'd be fantastic. And I wonder if the whole Russ narrative with the triple-double, averaging that 2 years in a row, people to see those eye-popping numbers and then forget there's 6 or 7 or 5 or 6 more categories. So,
you know what's kind of funny, by the way?
What's that?
Well, I got to turn turnovers back on here. Russell Westbrook was actually number 9 the season he averaged a triple-double in 9-cat. So even with those numbers, he was behind Chris Paul, James Harden, Cat, Giannis, Kawhi, by the way, Steph, Anthony Davis, and Kevin Durant. They were all still ahead of Russ despite the triple-double. So I'm not following this logic. I love it. I think it's creating value where I don't know that there needed to be value created, but hell, man, I'll take it. Neil, who you got next?
All right, next I'm going to go with, well, this is another maybe big name that I don't understand why he's, well, I'm sorry. I'm kind of like...
hemming and hawing.
I'm hemming and hawing. I have 2 guys I'm going to go with. I'll start with Bradley Beal at 21.6.
That seems real early.
Yeah, again, he averaged 34th in 8-cat, and his minutes were pretty solid. Now they've got Howard there, who's, I'm assuming, going to take a bunch of shots.
You know how I feel about Dwight.
I know what you think of him. So I don't see where he goes up again in his category. So I don't know why he's going this early.
So
anyway, what do you think?
I'm with you on this one. Number one, I realized that Beal got a big bump last year because he played in all 82 games. It's the same bump that Kemba gets, same bump that Russell Westbrook got, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, all these guys playing in massive numbers of games. It gives them a kick. So Bradley Beal, who was 38th, by the way, in 9 category, just to fill in that part of the equation, on a per-game basis, he was number 21 on a totals basis. So that's where you get that 21.6 ADP. Here's the thing, though, Neil. Can you really trust a guy to play 82 games every season? There's really only one way to play 82 games, and that is never miss a game. You can't get to, you can get to 81 82 different ways, right? You could miss one game anywhere along the entire season, and you can still play 81 games. 82, there's only one way to do it, and you got to be a 1 instead of a 0 in every single game. We'll go binary on this one. Bradley Beal played 82 games last year. He played 77 the year before that, 55, 63, 73, and 56, going back the previous 4 years. And obviously, you dealt with those stress reactions, and supposedly everything is cool. We have nothing to worry about. Well, we've got nothing to worry about until there's something to worry about. And banking on somebody playing all 82 games is a super risky wager. I think there are much safer guys you can take in that 21 range. And by the way, Neil, and while you got me angry about this one, he played in all 82 games. He had a fantastic season, and he was still number 21. If you're drafting him at 21, you've eliminated all of the value. The best case scenario we saw, it was 21, and now people are taking him at 21. People are out of their freaking minds, man. Nobody understands the concept of value.
Not enough people, but that's good for those of us who try to understand it, right? I will also say he played 36.3 minutes, which I don't think can go up. I mean, mathematically it can, but and you're right about the injuries. Unless you're LeBron James, I don't count on anyone playing 82 games.
No, I don't think he will either.
Even him, I don't count on, but he's the one guy that could maybe handle the physical part of the game better than anyone else.
What do you think about Ben Simmons?
I would not take him until probably the 4th round, Bradley Beal. So him going here in the late 2nd round seems very
good. Get him off the board. Get him out of the way. Somebody else can take him. That's just one more. That's one pick closer to my turn where I can go get somebody that's a better value. Here's another guy that jumped out to me as an interesting one. Ben Simmons, ADP of 18.3. Was that going to be one of yours as well?
Yeah, that was when I was deciding between.
I think you. I mean, okay, so 9-cat.
Yeah.
This is nonsense. This is total and complete nonsense. Unless he completely fixes his free throw percentage or 3-pointer effort, he's got no prayer of getting to 18. 8-cat, I could see a universe where maybe that's a thing. But 9-cat, he played 81 games last year. Again, you have to sort of assume somebody's going to sprain an ankle and miss 4 or 5 games at some point along the way. I'm not taking him this early. I can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, I love him as a player, but his free throw percentage is so bad that I don't see how that he's just not going to unless he's like in preseason doing really well and he's shooting like 90% from the free throw line. I can't trust that. And with Fultz there, I think his assists are going to come down a little bit, or they could come down a little bit. So I don't see how he improves upon his numbers from last year. There was one player I was going to mention on this, but I didn't want to offend my other co-host.
Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Adrian's other little favorite pal. You know what? The Jaren Jackson Jr. one is more amusing, I believe. But I think you and I, Neil, we agree more. We got to get all three of us on a pod so that Adrian can defend himself on the Donovan Mitchell thing.
I know, we just throw him under the bus.
I know. Sorry, Adrian. Neil and I don't really like Donovan as much as you do as a fantasy player. I love him as an athlete to watch. He looks incredible. He looks like a superstar in the making. But I mean, Neil, I think you and I have had this conversation before. How does he clear the hurdle and get into the top 20? He basically needs to be closer to a 30-point scorer because the other parts of his game probably aren't going to go up that much.
Yeah, I don't know either because I'm looking at his numbers for the second half of the season last year, and he finished 62nd just in the second half on 35 and a half minutes, and that's with 22 points. So, sure, he could probably get to like mid-20s in points, maybe a little bit more. The assists are on 4 and the rebounds are on 4. Steals 1.5. I mean, his field goal percentage at 43.7%. Maybe that goes up a little bit, but his free throw percent didn't really help him either at 78%, and his turnovers were at 3. I could see him being like a 25 and 5 guy. 25 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. But even that, unless his percentages skyrocket up, I don't think he's going to be inside the top 30.
Yeah, I'm with you. Too early. Yeah. All right, well, we're talking about here's a comp, actually, in my estimation, of a guy who's going way too low, and that's Jimmy Butler, who has that shooting guard profile, right? Donovan Mitchell, 20 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.5 steals, 2.5 3-pointers, 43.5% shooting, 80.5% at the free throw line. And then you look at a guy like Jimmy Butler, who comes in with 22 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals on 47.5% shooting, 85% from the free throw line, and fewer 3-pointers. That's going to be an area where a guy like Donovan Mitchell likely always exceeds Jimmy Butler. But if you're sort of comparing shooting guard profiles, and maybe this is a thing that really does come down to a health discussion, but Jimmy Butler is the better fantasy shooting guard. He has historically been a much greater positive in free throw percentage, and maybe Donovan improves on his. I don't think Donovan Mitchell is catching Jimmy Butler in field goal percent just because of generally where they take their shots from. Both good steals guys, but Butler a better passer, better rebounder at his stage in the career. And Jimmy, by the way, is going at 26. His ADP is 25.9, 8 slots later than Donovan Mitchell, and I think I'd rather have Jimmy Butler on my fantasy team. I'd almost consider, I'd say flipping these guys, but I think I'd probably put Donovan lower down. Still, if I can get Jimmy Butler at the end of round 2, beginning of round 3, where he's going right now, I salivate at the thought.
Yeah, I just want to keep agreeing with you, but I have to agree with you. Butler, yeah, I mean, look, I'm just doing a comparison from the second half of last season. He was injured a lot, but his averages he was 10th overall in ACAT. The second half of last season, 14th overall. So much better percentages. Similar, though, in points and rebounds and assists. It's just those steals are better and his blocks are a little bit better. So Donovan's going to have to get a lot more efficient in order to even come close to Butler. I think Butler, for me, would be a mid-second round draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
I'd look around the 15 to 18 range, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he's going almost 10 slots later than that right now.
Yeah, 25.9. Yeah, I was really surprised by that. He was another guy on my list. I haven't talked about guys who I thought were undervalued yet, except for Conley. But
is Otto Porter's ADP still really 34? What's wrong with okay, fine. There's the Dwight Howard thing. Yes, I would temper my expectations this year because I think Dwight's going to kick him right in between the legs in terms of his rebounding and defensive stats, and Otto Porter is not going to be number 15 again. But for heaven's sake, people, how many years in a row does he have to be a top 20 guy before we start to buy in? I feel like I'm staring down the barrel of getting Otto at the end of the third round, beginning of the fourth again this year. And at that price, I wouldn't turn it down. I know we talked last week, Neil, about how the projections, if people actually look at the Yahoo projections, have him inside the top 15, which I also disagree with. I think he's going to be back of that this year. I think you're looking at more that 20 to 25 range, but that's still around earlier than where his ADP is. People really don't want to believe in Otto Porter.
Well, from an A category perspective, he was a little bit lower. He was 39th overall.
Right. Okay, yeah.
The turnovers really help, as you know. So I could see him going there for 8 cat, but yeah, for 9 cat, he should be around higher for sure. I've always been a little bit hesitant on him. Maybe,
yeah, well, as an 8 cat guy, that makes more sense for you.
Yeah, the rankings make more sense for an 8 cat guy, but we don't know exactly how these rankings are formed. But I would I've never owned him on a team, but maybe I'll get some of them this year.
Oh, you're in a 9 cat somewhere along the way, right? Because you're in one of the hoop ball leagues. Get yourself some Otto. You'll love it.
I'm going to be in every single combination of leagues this year.
You really are. Here's another one that I think is undervalued. Kevin Love, ADP of 34.6. This is a guy that could be a top 10 value this season.
You know, I did not mark him because I'm still not sure about him. But yes, I agree with you. He has potential to harken back to the Minnesota days, or at least 90% of that. So he could be late first round, early second round value. And I guess either his ranking is throwing this off, or people just aren't buying it just yet.
I assume it has to be a health-related thing because he only played 59 games last year. His per-game rank in 9-cat was 26 last year. So he was actually well above this 34.5 number. He was about 9 slots better on a per-game basis. And if he plays basically another 11 games, he hits that mark. And he's going to do more this year. So his per-game basis is going to go up from 26. I think on a per-game, you could see him inside the top 12 to 14. The question is, can he play 70 games? But if I'm getting him at the end of the third round, that's a risk I'm willing to take. I mean, how many times can you have an opportunity to take a guy at 35 that could be a top 10 player? Not that frequently. You kind of have to try. I've been mostly throwing guys out at you that I think are being undervalued, but here's one that's being wildly overvalued. The great Blake Griffin, back with an ADP of 41 again. How many years in a row do we have to explain to people that he's not as good as everybody thinks? He was 58 on a per-game basis, and he only played in 58 games. This is a guy that doesn't have a very good per-game ceiling, and also has health issues. There's just sort of, there just aren't any good reasons, right? We just talked about Kevin Love, who has this wild ceiling but has health issues. There's your yin and your yang. Blake Griffin is just yang and yang. There's why would we do this? What are we doing? Why do people keep believing that he's somehow going to turn into a fantasy stud?
That sounded like a law firm. Anyway,
Yang and Yang Law. Yeah, it could be.
Blake Griffin is such a huge injury risk, and even when he wasn't injured, I mean, ACAT he was 46, so it's a little more reasonable, but only played 58 games. And for a guy, well, he's not really a great defender in terms of defending stats.
No, horrible.
I guess.
Both.
Yeah,
both.
0.7 and 0.3, and he's only shooting under 44% for a power forward, which is just horrendous. So you've got to make that up elsewhere. And I stay away from him at all costs. So I think he's going to finish in the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, if he's lucky. Give me one more from you, and then I'll do one more, and we'll wrap this bad boy up.
All right. So I'm going to go down a little further down the list.
Okay.
Just because we've kind of done more of the top heavy guys. I'm surprised by this. Dennis Smith Jr. going at 68.9.
That feels real early.
Yeah, well, 147 last year, and with Doncic, going to get some facilitator role this year. I imagine. I don't see where Dennis Smith gets his percentages are so bad. I don't see where he finishes in the top 100 this year.
Yeah, I you know how I feel about that type of stuff. I'm going to try to restrain myself because
Okay.
I'm going to restrain myself because I know we're getting towards the time limit on this pod. I wanted to make brief mention here at the end of the ADP of the two men that made up the Besbris bunch of 2017. Niko Mirotic has an ADP of 67 this year. Thaddeus Young has an ADP of 94. So they are both way ahead of where they were last season. Both guys had an ADP over 100, which does pull some of the value out. But if you can get your hands on Thad Young around 95, I actually still think there's probably about 2 rounds of value there. Not as fun as 4 or 5. And with Niko, I mean, we got him at 100, 115, and then he was putting up top 40 numbers for stretches last year. So that is also a little bit less thrilling. But that's not the guy I wanted to mention. The guy I wanted to mention here is my last one is Miles Turner. And that's the one, Neil, you and I actually texted about before going on air. I wanted to see if you were going to bring him up. So I'll throw him out there as my last pick. ADP of 52.3. This has bounce back written all over it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it has overreaction written all over it from last year. I would definitely take him much earlier. I mean, I don't think he's going to be in the 4th round in most of my drafts, but certainly that would be, if he's there, it's a no-brainer for me at that point, and maybe earlier. I'll have to do my projections still to see where he comes out, but I would say he's probably going to finish. I would expect him to be somewhere between 35 and 40.
Yeah, I feel like the 52 that his ADP right now, that's the bottom. That's the floor for Miles Turner. That's exactly what you're looking for when you're looking for a draft day steal. I will also mention, by the way, once again, go get the Hoop Ball draft guide so that you can see when these players' ADP shifts. You don't have to write it down yourself today and tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. Hoop Ball will do it for you. If, for instance, in a few weeks, when the first ADP analysis comes out, Miles Turner has an ADP of 49.3, they will let you know his ADP improved, trying to figure the right word to use, it lowered. It went to a lower number, an earlier draft position, by 3 slots. Which, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean that if you got into a draft that day, he'd be going at 49. It means that he's going earlier and earlier, and you have to try to figure out exactly how far that actually means. But it certainly means he's not going at 52 anymore. Now, on the other hand, maybe we check out an ADP report in a month, and it says he's still going at 52.3, or maybe it's 52.5, which would actually mean he's going maybe even a hair later than that. I don't necessarily expect it to go in either way. If I had to guess, I'd say probably he'll start to go a little earlier as the season approaches, but this has all that same feeling of kind of the Oladipo deal from last year, who had just an off season playing with Russell Westbrook. His draft position fell. We had seen him with top 30 potential in Orlando, and then after his season in Oklahoma City, he was going in the 40s and 50s. I don't think people expected him to go top 12, but I think most people figured, hey, I'm going to get this guy at 45, and he's going to be number 28 this year. That's pretty sweet. And I think that may be what we're looking at with a guy like Miles Turner, where maybe he never gets to that top 15 that people had projected him at last year, but all he needs to do is stay healthy, and he'll be above 52.5. Neil, that was fun. I really, you want to do some more of these coming up? Let's do some ADP analysis shows as we move towards draft season.
Absolutely. I'll be mocking with Adrian almost every hour on the hour. So I'll be.
You know what you should do in one of those mocks?
Yeah.
Take Donovan Mitchell in the first and Jaren Jackson Jr. in the second. and then screenshot whatever Adrian texts you so we can put it on the podcast. Adrian, we're killing you on today's show, man. I hope he listens.
For him. He's not even here to defend himself.
I know. I really hope he listens, because otherwise everybody else listening is going to be like, Adrian, you got to listen to the pod. They killed you today. Adrian, miss you, buddy. I will talk to Adrian on Tuesday's show. Neil, you will talk to him tomorrow, so you can go after the young lad. I say young because, as everybody knows, he just had his 14th birthday a couple weeks ago. I'm crushing him. Adrian, we love you, my man. He is at Adrian Benjamins, by the way, if you want to give him a follow. He is the mock master here at hoop-ball.com. Neil Rochlani, Dan Besbris, your hosts here on this Thursday edition of Fantasy NBA Today. Go get the draft guide, everybody. Enjoy breaking down ADP. There's so many more. And by the way, maybe I didn't push hard enough last time. Let's talk about this stuff on Twitter. There are plenty of names out there on this list that we didn't talk about. Kyle Kuzma at 75, Hassan Whiteside at 74, Harrison Barnes at 73. The list literally goes on forever. Dario Saric at 62. Tweet at us, and we'll be happy to talk about it all freaking day because this stuff is fun and we're degenerates. Am I about right there? I think I got everything, right?
Oh, yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
We need a better word for degenerate. I feel like that's not positive. I don't know.
Oh, it's all in how you interpret it, my man. I interpret it positively. I think it's like somebody calling me, Dan, you're handsome and degenerate. Neil, your wisdom is through the roof. You're also a degenerate. You should say thank you. He's Neil Rochlani at Ball with Neil on Twitter. I'm at Dan Besbris. Have a great day, everybody. Neil and Adrian coming at you tomorrow, breaking down the mock. So long.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.